I don't remember what sparked the conversation. Maybe something small, something stupid. A bill she forgot to pay. A comment I made about her being late again. But I remember how it ended. Her standing near the kitchen island, back straight, chin slightly lifted like she was presenting an argument in court. "I don't need your support. I can stand on my own." She said it without flinching, like a dare. Not with anger, but something colder, a kind of self-satisfaction, like she'd been waiting to say it for a long time. I didn't respond the way she expected. I didn't raise my voice or scoff or even ask what she meant. I just nodded once. Not out of agreement, but acknowledgement. She'd drawn a line. I saw it clearly, even if she didn't realize she'd crossed it. For a moment, we stood there in the quiet. The clock above the sink ticked louder than usual. She turned back to the sink, rinsing a plate like nothing had happened. I stayed where I was, watching her shoulder blades move under her blouse. She always hated silence in a conversation, used to say it made her feel abandoned. But this time, she didn't try to fill it. I walked out before the plate was clean, grabbed my keys, stepped onto the porch, and let the cold air slap me in the face. The sky was the kind of dull gray that hangs just before a storm, not dramatic, just heavy. I didn't walk far, just to the end of the driveway, where the mailbox sat crooked from last winter's snowplow. I stood there a long time, longer than I should have, pretending to check the mail. I wasn't angry yet. I was unsettled. Her words echoed with a sharp clarity that didn't fade the way most arguments did. They clung. And not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. She wanted to make a statement, and she did. But she didn't see what it cost in that moment. The thread she tugged on had been holding up more than she realized. Later, I came back inside. She was in the living room, scrolling her phone like we hadn't just redrawn the map of our marriage. I didn't mention the conversation. Neither did she. We moved through the evening like two professionals who had just negotiated a tense business deal and agreed not to revisit the terms. We were polite, efficient. But something changed that day, not in her, maybe, but in me. I stopped assuming we were on the same team. That night, I lay beside her in the dark, our backs turned like we were strangers in a hotel bed. Her breathing was steady, maybe faked, maybe not. Mine wasn't. I stared at the ceiling, watching the faint play of headlights from the street drift across the plaster. It looked like waves moving over rock, slow, cold, impersonal. "I don't need your support. I can stand on my own." The sentence looped in my head, not angry, just insistent. It had been delivered like a mic drop, but now it echoed like a warning. At first, I thought she was talking about emotional support, about feeling unheard, maybe unappreciated. We'd all said versions of that line in rough patches. But there was something else under it, and now that I was lying there with her body just inches from mine but miles away, I could hear it more clearly. She didn't just mean support like holding her when she cried or texting back quickly when she had a bad day. She meant all of it, the safety net, the quiet compromises, the financial cushions I arranged without her ever asking, the dozens of invisible things I did every week so her world stayed stable, even when mine didn't. She had started pulling away months ago. I just hadn't labeled it. Late nights, finishing things at work, a sharper edge in casual conversations, more time spent with her phone, less with me. But it hadn't felt dramatic enough to name. I told myself it was a phase, stress, maybe even seasonal depression. We don't leap to betrayal when we love someone. We lean toward excuses, toward benefit of the doubt. Now I realized she'd been slowly rehearsing independence while I kept offering partnership. That statement wasn't an outburst. It was a summary, a mission statement. Something pre-written and memorized. The room felt smaller than usual. Not claustrophobic, just too quiet, too deliberate. A silence we both accepted. She shifted once in her sleep, or the pretense of it, turning toward the window. Her hand brushed mine by accident. I didn't move. Neither did she. I used to count those moments as intimacy, unspoken closeness, comfortable quiet. Now it felt like camouflage. We were still going through the motions, brushing teeth side by side in the bathroom, passing each other plates at dinner, laughing briefly at sitcom reruns we both seen a dozen times. But I started realizing those were relics, not rituals, leftovers from a time when things were real. I didn't sleep much that night. The bed felt too even, too unbothered. And somewhere deep in me, something started adjusting, not breaking, but recalibrating. I stopped waiting for a sign things would fix themselves. Instead, I started watching. quietly, carefully, because if she truly meant what she said, I needed to see how far she was willing to go to prove it. I didn't wake up angry, just focused. That morning, I let her make her own coffee. She always liked it strong, with oat milk and one of those overpriced sweeteners she never restocked herself. I used to prep it without thinking, a muscle memory kind of kindness, but I didn't move. I just poured my own black, and sat at the kitchen table while she rummaged through the pantry. She glanced at me once, her mouth tightening slightly when she realized the oat milk was empty. No comment, no request. She found almond milk and muttered something under her breath. I didn't ask what she said. I didn't offer help. I just sipped my coffee and read an email twice, not because it was important but because it gave me a reason not to look at her. That day, and the next, I started matching her energy. No overreaching. No anticipation of her needs. No checking if her tire pressure light had come on again. No asking if she needed help prepping for the event she mentioned last week. If she could stand on her own, I wanted to see what that really looked like. The house got quieter. I stopped initiating conversations that had once been part of our rhythm, evening recaps, workday summaries, the little logistical dances about what needed to be picked up or paid or remembered. She noticed. Her responses stayed neutral, but I saw it in her eyes, the way they lingered a little longer when I didn't follow her into the living room. The way she opened a drawer too hard one evening, then closed it softer like she was correcting herself. Once, she left a grocery list near my keys. No name on it. Just a quiet assumption. I left it untouched. That night, when she got home, she didn't mention the empty fridge. She just ordered takeout and acted like it was spontaneous. We ate on opposite ends of the couch, not hostile, just detached. She seemed irritated, but not surprised, like she'd expected this, maybe even wanted it. Her pride kept her from addressing it, and my restraint kept me from calling it out. We were locked in a silent negotiation neither of us had admitted we were part of. But it was working. I was learning more from her silence than her words ever offered. Once, she asked if I was okay. Her tone was too casual. She didn't stop scrolling her phone. I looked up and smiled faintly. Just giving you space. She nodded like it made sense. But her thumb paused over the screen for a second longer than necessary. A tiny crack, maybe? And still, she pretended she was fine. That everything was working. That independence didn't taste like loneliness. But I was watching, closely, not because I wanted her to fail, but because I needed to know whether she ever really wanted us to survive. I didn't touch our joint account. Not directly. Instead, I stopped propping it up. For years, I'd quietly absorbed the overflow. The gym memberships she never canceled, the streaming subscriptions she forgot were still active, the personal shopping charges that showed up when she was just browsing. She didn't ask, and I didn't announce it. I simply made sure things stayed balanced, because that's what you do when you're protecting something that matters. But if she was standing on her own now, I figured it was time to let the numbers reflect that. I let the automatic payments run without padding the account. The extra I used to transfer in each month, I redirected to my personal savings, not out of spite, out of clarity. Her independence had been declared. I was just making sure it reached every corner. The first hiccup came quietly. She called the bank while I was in the next room. I heard the clipped tone shift into confusion. No, I didn't make that transfer. What do you mean it didn't go through? She came into the kitchen a few minutes later, still on the phone, eyebrows drawn. She opened the banking app and scrolled furiously. Her mouth moved like she was tasting something sour. When she hung up, she didn't look at me immediately, just stood there, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. Eventually, she exhaled sharply. Did you change something with the account? I stirred my coffee slowly. Nope. Just stopped covering what wasn't mine. Her mouth opened, then shut. She blinked a few times, like recalibrating the tone she was about to use. You could have at least told me. You said you could stand on your own. I said it calmly. No edge. No sarcasm. Just a reminder. She didn't argue. She just stared for a second too long, then walked out, her footsteps louder than usual on the tile. That week, little cracks began to show. A missed delivery because the card on file failed. A frustrated sigh when she realized the car insurance autopay had bounced. Her mood shifted, not obviously, but subtly. Less performative independence, more quiet scrambling. I said nothing. I wasn't pulling away emotionally to punish her. I was pulling back logistically to honor her words. That's what she'd asked for, whether she realized it or not. And as I watched her balance the image she curated, the strong, capable, self-sufficient version of herself, against the friction of real-world consequences, something became painfully clear. She hadn't built independence, she had assumed support. There's a difference, and she was just starting to feel it. I stopped replying to her texts right away. Not to be petty, I just let them sit. If she messaged about dinner or errands or vague things like, "What's the plan for tonight?" I read it and kept working. Sometimes I'd respond an hour later, sometimes not at all. It wasn't a game. It was an adjustment, matching the pace she'd set long before she ever said the words out loud. The first time I skipped a dinner, it was almost effortless. She hadn't technically invited me. She'd mentioned it offhand, some colleague's birthday thing, low-key. Just drinks. There was no we in her tone, so I didn't ask what time, didn't dress for it, didn't follow up. When she came back that night, I was already in bed, half watching a documentary I didn't care about. She walked into the room, paused for a beat in the doorway like she expected me to say something. Her eyes scanned the TV, then me. "You didn't want to come?" I muted the screen. "Didn't know I was supposed to." Her jaw tightened, but she masked it with a shrug. "It was casual. Glad you had fun." She looked at me like she wanted to say more, like she had rehearsed a line on the drive home. But whatever it was, she swallowed it. The bathroom door clicked shut a little too hard behind her. The next few days, I noticed something shift online. She started posting more, not selfies, but those indirect quotes wrapped in pretty backgrounds. Things like, "Sometimes silence is the loudest betrayal," or, "Strong women don't beg to be understood." Our mutual friends started liking them, commenting with heart emojis or little notes like, "Always here for you, flex biceps." It was subtle, but the signal was there. She was framing a narrative. Not outright lies, just the soft shaping of a version of events that painted her as quietly enduring something. I didn't counter it. I didn't post cryptic quotes, or try to clarify the story. I just watched it unfold, quietly cataloging each shift. People don't unravel all at once, they fray in the margins first. She started showing visible irritation in small things. Huffs when I didn't ask about her day. Cold shoulders when I didn't follow her into conversations. Passive-aggressive smiles when I reminded her, gently, always gently, that she'd asked for space. What she hadn't expected was that I'd take her at her word. What she wanted, I realized, wasn't independence. It was freedom without the cost, support without the weight of accountability. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was still studying her, still listening with more than my ears, because I could feel something coming, something she wasn't ready for. And when it arrived, I wanted to be steady. I wanted to be precise. It started small, almost too small to notice, if I hadn't been paying attention the way I was. She brought home my favorite bakery sandwich one afternoon, no comment, just slid it onto the counter next to where I was working and walked away. A week earlier, she'd barely noticed when I skipped lunch. Then came the casual drop-ins, standing near me while I watched a game, asking questions she already knew the answers to. "Did you ever fix the garage app? I know it was glitching." Things she hadn't asked about in months. I kept my responses polite, short, neutral. She lingered longer each time, like she was waiting for something I wasn't offering anymore. Not affection, not forgiveness, just investment. She was testing the waters with her toe and realizing the temperature had changed. "I didn't mean it like that," she finally said one evening, halfway through a half-hearted movie night she initiated. I didn't turn my head. "Mean what?" She shifted beside me on the couch. "That thing I said? About not needing support." She tried to laugh, light and dismissive, but it caught awkwardly in her throat. "You know how I get when I'm overwhelmed. I say things." I muted the movie and looked at her, not cold, just steady. "Yeah, I remember exactly how you said it." Something in her face flickered, not guilt, caution. She wasn't apologizing, she was rewriting. "You know I always appreciate everything you do, right?" Her voice softened now, almost sincere. I needed space to feel like myself again. I wasn't trying to push you away." But she had. Not in words, in systems, in choices, in timing. And I didn't respond the way she wanted, because I wasn't interested in explanations anymore. I was watching patterns, not apologies. That's what most people miss. They think saying sorry, or something adjacent to it, undoes the data. But for me, the numbers were adding up. Her tone had changed because her comfort had changed. The net she thought would always be there had gone slack. And now, with the friction starting to build around her, finances tighter, emotional safety colder, social optics fraying, she wanted to soften the blowback without admitting what she'd staged. I nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact. Thanks for saying that. No reassurance, no reaching back. She waited, then smiled tightly and turned back to the TV. But I could see it in the way her hands fidgeted with the blanket. She knew something had shifted, and not in her favor. But she didn't know yet that I had already taken steps she couldn't see. I had already begun looking beyond the apology, because something deeper had been unraveling long before her tone changed. And I was almost ready to pull the thread. The night I went through her phone backup, I wasn't angry. I was methodical. She'd left her laptop open, gone to bed early. A minor headache, she claimed, brushing my arm with a gentleness I hadn't felt in months. I told her I'd finish up emails. She nodded and disappeared down the hall, footsteps soft and deliberate. I waited 15 minutes. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted the silence to settle. I opened her cloud backup. She hadn't changed her password. She hadn't needed to, until now. I didn't dig deep. I didn't have to. It was all right there in the messages. The name was ordinary. A male coworker I'd met once at a conference. Polite smile, firm handshake. Nothing remarkable, which made it worse. The texts weren't explicit. That would have made it easier somehow. They were just charged enough to cross a line. The kind of messages built on slow familiarity, jokes that referenced private meetings, emojis that didn't belong in professional exchanges, delayed responses designed to build tension. The oldest message dated back to a week before her now infamous declaration. I'm just saying, maybe I'd be less stressed if certain things at home weren't always so heavy. That line read like a dagger dressed in charm. No names, no details, just enough to shift blame, to imply burden. He replied with, "Some people don't see what they've got until it's too late." And she responded, "Exactly." That was the same week she told me she could stand on her own. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a setup. I scrolled slowly, letting each message burn itself into memory. She hadn't left the relationship behind. She'd kept it around like a parachute, something to reach for if the flight got uncomfortable. And while she claimed independence, she'd been preparing a softer landing. But here's what she hadn't calculated. I don't chase truth emotionally. I track it like a map. I took screenshots, saved them in a locked drive, compiled dates, matched timelines, cross-checked when she'd said she was working late versus when those messages spiked in frequency. Patterns emerged. So did strategy. She hadn't stumbled. She'd positioned herself to look like the one in control, even while she reached for someone else. And now I saw it clearly. She hadn't declared independence. She tested abandonment, expecting to be caught. But I wasn't going to catch her. I was going to let her fall, cleanly, without spectacle. Because she was right about one thing. She could stand on her own. And I was done pretending I didn't know what she'd meant. The next morning, I woke up with clarity. Not relief, not rage, just clarity. The kind that comes when every lie is accounted for, and the noise inside your head finally shuts off. I didn't speak a word about what I knew. I kissed her forehead on the way out, like always. She smiled, distracted. Her phone buzzed while she packed her lunch, and she turned slightly away as she read it. It didn't matter. I didn't need confirmation. I already had the receipts, literally and metaphorically. I drove straight to my lawyer's office. It wasn't my first visit there, but it was the first time I spoke with precision. No theory. No hypotheticals. I showed him the messages, the timeline I'd created, the asset list I'd updated meticulously over the past month. He scanned the documents slowly, nodding with the patience of a man who'd seen worse but appreciated my preparation. "We'll begin with freezing the joint accounts," I said. "I want my business funds separated before she realizes what's coming." He raised his eyebrows, not in disapproval, but in acknowledgement. "You want it surgical." "Exactly." Within 48 hours, my name was removed from shared liabilities, and my company's accounts were transferred to personal holding under protective clauses we'd drafted 6 months earlier, just in case. I filed quiet updates to my living trust and redirected my direct deposits. No dramatic moves, just quiet corrections. She didn't notice. Not yet. That weekend, she asked if I wanted to go with her to some art walk downtown. Her tone was soft, almost hopeful. I agreed. We strolled through gallery booths like a couple that still had a pulse. She smiled for photos, leaned into me when acquaintances passed. I watched her perform stability, the way some people pose in the mirror to see how grief fits before anyone actually dies. I matched her warmth, but kept one hand on the knife, figuratively speaking. Because what she didn't know was that I'd already listed the condo under appraisal, already cancelled the upcoming travel reservations she hadn't asked about but would soon notice missing. At home, she talked more, asked questions, lingered near me while I folded laundry. I responded gently, kept my eyes kind, but I didn't let her back in. She wasn't trying to repair us, she was trying to rewind to the moment before I knew. But I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't need to blow it all up. I just needed to be gone before she noticed the walls were hollow. Because some betrayals don't deserve fireworks. They deserve silence and a closed door. And I was halfway through writing her ending. She noticed first when her card declined. It was at the boutique down the block, the kind of place she went to for stress therapy disguised as self-care. I'd see the receipts later, of course. But that day, she came home rattled. She didn't mention it outright. Just dropped her keys a little louder on the entry table. Kicked her heels off like they were the problem. Opened and closed the fridge twice without removing anything. I stayed silent, working at the dining room table. I could feel her glancing over, half expecting me to ask what was wrong. But I didn't. She was used to being buffered, to having small failures swept away before they grew teeth. That layer was gone now, and she didn't know how to patch it herself. Over the next week, I watched it accelerate. The coworker, the one with the perfectly casual messages, began to pull away. I could tell by her expressions after phone calls that ended too fast, by the vague frustration in her voice when she said things like, "He's been swamped lately." She started juggling more than just bills. She scrambled for rhythm, calling friends she hadn't seen in months, posting photos from 6 months ago like they were new. Her captions shifted from self-empowerment slogans to half-hearted optimism. "Sometimes strength is just not collapsing." The likes thinned. So did the comments. The same friends who had cheered her on when she was standing tall now fell quiet. Support's a loud parade when it's hypothetical, but real cracks make people nervous. Her schedule began to slip. She missed a dentist appointment, showed up late to a meeting and blamed the traffic. I knew the signs, not of collapse, but of instability. The kind you feel under your feet before anyone above realizes the structure's compromised. One night she cooked dinner. That alone told me everything. She didn't enjoy cooking, always said it. Stressed her out. But there she was, in the kitchen, apron tied too tight, trying to recreate a dish we used to love. The aroma filled the house, almost convincing. When she plated it and set it in front of me, I saw the careful smile, not warm, but hopeful in a quiet panic kind of way. "I thought it'd be nice," she said softly. "It is," I replied. I ate slowly, watching her across the table. She didn't touch her food. And I didn't touch the lifeline she was trying to throw. She was trying to restart the old rhythm. The one where I jumped in to fix, to buffer, to carry. But I wasn't stepping in anymore. Because this wasn't cruelty. This was clarity. And she was just beginning to feel the weight of what standing alone really meant. She was setting the table when I asked her to sit down. Nothing dramatic. No heavy tone. Just a calm, steady invitation. She hesitated, plate still in her hand. "Is everything okay?" I nodded toward the chair. "Just sit for a minute." She placed the plate down slowly, her movements careful. She took the seat opposite me like it was a test she hadn't studied for. I slid the folder across the table. Plain matte black. No labels. No threats. "Just wait." She stared at it for a moment before opening it. Inside were the messages. Printed, dated, organized. The backup logs. A calendar timeline showing overlaps between her declarations of independence and the exchanges with him. Nothing embellished. No commentary. Just facts. Her hand hovered over the last page, then dropped into her lap. Her mouth moved once, then stilled. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. I didn't. She started, then stopped. I leaned back, arms crossed loosely. "You didn't what?" She looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't serious." "I know," I said. "It wasn't supposed to be. Just enough to make sure you weren't alone if you jumped." She closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't plan for it to go that way." "You planned enough," I said. Carefully. She opened her mouth again, to argue, to spin, to salvage something, but I was already shaking my head. "I'm not here for an explanation. I'm not angry. I paused. I'm just done. The silence stretched. She tried again. I was scared. I felt stuck, and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed. You didn't ask. You announced. You said you could stand on your own. I let the words land without venom. So I stopped holding you. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She looked like someone trying to rewind time with silence. I didn't think you'd actually let me go. That part I believed. She thought the bluff would hold. That I'd protest. That I'd chase. I didn't. I rose, collected the folder, and walked it back to my study. When I returned, she was still sitting there, hands clasped like a child caught in something deeper than mischief. I placed the last piece on the table, a sealed envelope with the initial legal papers. Not final, not filed, just the first step. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. You're really doing this? I already did. She didn't follow me when I left the room. She didn't speak again that night, because the confrontation wasn't about breaking her. It was about closing the last open window, the one she'd kept propped with ambiguity. And now it was shut, quiet, unmistakable. The morning I moved out, the sun rose without apology. No storm clouds, no cinematic rain. Just clear skies and sharp light cutting through the blinds like everything was normal. She was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed in a sweatshirt too big for her. Maybe mine, maybe not. Her hair was pulled back, but unevenly, like she hadn't looked in the mirror before tying it up. She didn't say anything when I stepped into the room with my bag. Just watched. I didn't pack everything. Just what I needed. A couple of suits, my laptop, documents, the watch my father left me. The essentials. The rest would be handled later, cleanly, legally. She finally spoke as I zipped the last compartment. Where are you going? Somewhere I can breathe. Her throat bobbed. You don't have to do this today. I already did it months ago, I said, voice even. Today's just the paperwork catching up. She stood, arms crossed loosely, like she didn't know what to do with them. So that's it? You're just walking away? I looked at her, really looked, and not the version she posted online or the one she wore around friends. The real one. Fractured. Unsteady. Still trying to pose like she had control. You said you could stand on your own, I said, calm and final. I just stopped holding you. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She stepped forward slightly, then stopped herself. She wasn't used to not being followed. Not used to the echo of her choices bouncing back with no one rushing to absorb the impact. There was no fight. No last appeal. Just silence between us. The same kind that had grown for months, now fully matured. I picked up the bag. At the door, I turned once more. Not out of sentiment. Just confirmation.